Why was she missing every shot? That was the question hanging in the hot air, though no one dared to ask it aloud. The sun beat down mercilessly on the training field, turning the dirt beneath her boots into a powdery trap that seemed to swallow every step she took. Sweat rolled into her eyes, stinging, blurring her vision until the target swayed and doubled. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, but the bullet went wide again. Another miss. The third that morning. And this wasn't just any drill. This was the one that separated those who would wear the uniform with pride from those who would be quietly dismissed, sent back to lives they thought they'd left behind. Around her, the other recruits looked like machines, their movements sharp, crisp, mercilessly precise. Every shot landed with mechanical finality, one after another. The air cracked with gunfire in perfect rhythm. She moved like she was drowning, her arms sluggish, her breath uneven, her body betraying her at every turn. Each mistake carved deeper into her chest, hollowing out the fragile confidence she had fought to hold on to. She had clawed her way here, harder than most, carrying scars no one else could see. And now, standing in the heat, felt the weight of every whisper circling her. Some recruits smirked, their eyes cutting sideways, amused at her collapse. Others looked away as if embarrassed for her. But every look, whether cruel or indifferent, spoke the same judgment. She wasn't cut out for this. Adjusted her grip, trying to still her hands. Her father's voice came back to her like a curse she couldn't silence. "You'll never be enough for them." He said it more times than she could count, sometimes with a bottle in his hand, sometimes with a shadow of disappointment she thought might crush her. She had joined the program to prove him wrong, but his words had followed her here, crawling up her spine at every failure. And now they seemed to echo louder than the drill instructor's commands, louder than the gunfire, louder than the pounding of her own heart. She fired again. Another miss. The dust around the target puffed up, mocking her. Her throat tightened as laughter rippled across the line. Not outright, not cruel enough to be punished, but sharp enough to pierce her. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the ground to swallow her whole, to spare her from the shame pressing down like the sun itself. And then she saw him. At the edge of the field, arms crossed, face unreadable, stood the SEAL commander. He wasn't just another officer. His reputation carried weight, the kind that made grown men stiffen their posture when he entered a room. He had fought in battles they only read about, made decisions that changed lives, and now he was watching her fail. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't moved, but his silence was heavier than any reprimand. His chest burned. If he told her to leave, she knew she would. She had no more excuses, no more defenses. She could already feel the moment coming, the dismissal that would confirm what she feared, that she was nothing more than a mistake, an intrusion in a place that demanded perfection. The commander stepped forward. Boots crunched against gravel. Dust swirled at his heels. The recruits quieted. Even the air seemed to hesitate. He stopped just inches from her, his shadow falling across her rifle, his eyes locked on hers. The weight of every expectation, every judgment pressed between them. She waited for the words she dreaded: "Pack your things, you're done." But instead he spoke three words. "Eyes on me." The command cut through the heat like a blade, sharp and deliberate. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't scolding. It was steady, grounding. Froze, she wasn't sure she'd heard him right. Her hands trembled against the rifle. Her chest heaved with shallow breaths. "Eyes on me." The words repeated in her head, circling, echoing. Not pity, not doubt. Something else lived in his voice. Something she hadn't expected to hear in this place. Belief. For the first time, she raised her gaze fully to him. His eyes were steady, unwavering, as though daring her to believe what she had never believed about herself. That she could do this. That she belonged here. That she wasn't broken, not yet. Her mind screamed with the memory of every miss, every stumble, every whispered laugh behind her back. But his voice lingered, pulling her out of the noise. The field faded. The heat faded. Even her father's voice seemed to retreat for one fragile breath. All that remained was his command: "Eyes on me." She inhaled, deep, steady, her trembling eased. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked the air, sharp and crisp, and the bullet struck dead center. Gasps rippled across the recruits. Silence followed, charged and electric. She felt it, the weight of every eye shifting, no longer mocking, no longer dismissing. For the first time, she wasn't drowning. She was anchored. But it wasn't over. She fired again. Another hit, then another, each shot steadier than the last. The rifle no longer felt like an enemy in her hands, but a part of her body aligning with purpose. By the time the last round struck the target, the silence had shifted again, this time into something she had never expected. Applause. It wasn't loud, it wasn't wild, but it was real. Hands clapped, hesitant at first, then stronger until the sound carried across the field. His heart pounded. She didn't know whether to smile or collapse. Her chest was tight with something she hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not yet, but the spark of it, fragile and dangerous. She looked to the commander, searching, needing to know if it mattered. He gave a single nod, small, controlled, but it struck deeper than all the whispers, all the laughter, all the doubts that had chained her for years. In that nod lived something greater than approval. It was responsibility, a passing of weight from him to her. He hadn't saved her. He had reminded her that she could save herself. And now she had no excuse. Belief had been given. She would have to rise to it. But questions lingered unspoken. Why had he done it? Why show grace in a place where weakness was punished, where mercy was a liability? Some recruits saw it as favoritism, others as a rare glimpse of true leadership. Herself didn't know what to call it. She only knew that her life had shifted in that instant, and the shift came with a cost. That night, lying in her bunk, her body still aching from the drills, she replayed it over and over. Eyes on me. His voice lived in her head, but so did her father's. The clash of them tore her in two. For every ounce of belief she felt rising, another part of her dragged her down with the memory of failure. But she clung to it anyway. The nod, the steadiness, the reminder that she wasn't alone in the fight against herself. The next day, under a sky painted gold and crimson, she faced the same drill again. And this time flawless. Shot after shot, relentless. Not perfect, but enough to prove she wasn't the same as before. A soldier reborn. The commander never mentioned that moment again. He didn't need to. His silence carried it forward. His command echoed not just in her memory but in her body, in the way she stood taller, breath deeper, moved with purpose. But even as she passed, even as she felt the shift within herself, she couldn't shake one truth. His words had opened a door, but stepping through it, surviving what lay beyond would be on her. And what waited there she had no way of knowing. Because courage, she was beginning to understand, doesn't always roar from within. Sometimes it comes from the quiet insistence of another voice, one that refuses to look away. And sometimes, belief is more dangerous than doubt. Why did some of them still refuse to clap? That was the question haunting her as the applause died down on the training field. She had felt the shift, the ripple of respect that comes when failure turns into fire. But not every face carried admiration. A few eyes stayed sharp, narrowed, calculating. They weren't convinced. And in the silence after, she realized something even more dangerous than failure. Doubt that lingers in the hearts of your peers. Doubt that waits to resurface at the worst possible moment. Carried that weight with her into the barracks. Her body was sore, her knuckles scraped, her shoulders raw from the rifle strap, but none of it compared to the heaviness in her chest. Lying in her bunk, listening to the snores and shifting bodies around her, she tried to quiet the storm inside. The commander's voice still lingered, eyes on me, steady, grounding. But the whispers had not vanished. They clung like shadows, alive even in the dark. The next morning the routine slammed into them. Dawn wasn't gentle. The whistle screamed them awake, boots hit the floor, and within minutes they were on the obstacle course, mud swallowing their legs, ropes burning their palms. Lungs screamed for air, but she pushed forward, her focus sharper now. Every time her body begged her to quit, she repeated the words in her head. Eyes on me. Not just his order, her vow. And yet the course wasn't her greatest battle. It was the looks. The recruit to her left, sharp-jawed, relentless, the type who excelled at everything without breaking a sweat, shot her a glance as she hauled herself over the final wall. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence was accusation enough. To him, her second chance had been a gift no one else was offered, and gifts in this place were dangerous. By midweek, the tension had grown. Every drill, every march, every exercise carried an undercurrent of rivalry. Felt it. The air around her was thicker, heavier. Not just from the weight of training, but from the eyes measuring her, waiting for her to falter again. She had become more than just another recruit. She was a test. If she succeeded, it meant the commander's faith had been justified. If she failed, it meant he had been wrong. And the burden of his reputation pressed harder than any rucksack on her back. But training wasn't only about physical survival. They introduced scenarios, late-night navigation drills, simulated rescue missions, moments where exhaustion blurred into hallucination. Stumbled more than once, her compass swimming before her eyes, her hands trembling as she tied knots in the dark. And every mistake reminded her, one slip, one wrong turn, and glare would return. It was on the fifth night that the storm inside her broke open. They were running night maneuvers, packs heavy, boots sinking in the mud. Rain lashed at their faces, the forest swallowing their light. His breath came ragged, her legs quivering as they pushed up the incline. Moved effortlessly ahead, shouting coordinates, his voice sharp enough to cut the night. She stumbled, slipping on wet roots, falling hard enough to knock the wind from her chest. Mud smeared her face, her palms stung. The squad surged ahead without hesitation. No one reached for her. No one waited. She lay there, chest heaving, rain beating down for one long second that felt like an eternity. And in that second the voices returned. "You don't belong here." Her father's sneer. Silence. The smirks on the training field. She almost let it consume her, almost stayed down. But then she saw something. A shadow standing still among the blur of moving bodies. The commander. He wasn't supposed to be there, not in the forest, not in the storm. But there he was at the edge of the trees, watching. He didn't move toward her. He didn't offer a hand. He simply stood, eyes locked on hers, waiting. Her chest burned. Anger flared, not at him, at herself. She shoved herself up, mud dripping from her chin, legs screaming as she pushed forward. She ran harder than she thought possible, closing the gap between her and the squad. Each stride a defiance, not of her father, but of the voice inside that still whispered she wasn't enough. By the time she reached the checkpoint, her body was on the edge of collapse. She dropped to her knees, gasping, hands trembling. Smirked, shaking his head. "You're dead weight," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because when she glanced back, the commander was gone, as if he'd never been there at all. That night, lying awake, she thought about it. Was he truly there, or had exhaustion conjured him from memory? It didn't matter. His presence, real or imagined, had forced her up. That was what lingered. That was what mattered. Days turned into weeks, grew sharper, faster. Her aim steadied, her endurance stretched. But with progress came a new conflict. It wasn't just any more. Others had begun to notice the commander's silence around her, the way his gaze lingered when she trained. Rumors swirled in the barracks. Some said he was protecting her. Others whispered darker things. Heard them all, and every word cut deep. Because if they believed she was being favored, then every step she took, every success she earned would be questioned. She wanted to shout at them, to tell them no one could hear the war inside her, that no one saw how many times she broke before sunrise and rebuilt herself by daylight. But she stayed quiet, because proving herself with words meant nothing here. It was during weapons training that the whispers finally broke into confrontation. Approached her, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes sharp with disdain. "You think a nod from him makes you one of us? You're wrong. Out there in the real fight, nobody's going to hold your hand." Met his gaze, steady, refusing to flinch. "Good," she said softly, "because I don't need one." The words surprised even her. They weren't defiant, they weren't shouted. They were calm, controlled, and for the first time blinked. He didn't smile, he didn't respond, he simply turned and walked away. But the exchange left shaken, because beneath her calm words lived the truth she didn't dare admit. She was terrified he might be right. That night, as the barracks grew quiet, she sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at her hands. They no longer trembled like they once did. Calloused, they looked like the hands of a soldier, but she couldn't shake the question. Was she one? Or was she still just a girl chasing the echo of a voice that believed in her more than she believed in herself? The commander never answered that question. He didn't need to. His silence left space for her to find the answer on her own. And yet one truth lingered, unspoken, heavy in her chest. Belief was no longer her burden alone. It was his too, and the weight of carrying someone else's faith could break you just as easily as it could save you. Why did her hands tremble again after all that training, all that progress? That was the question clawing at her as the transport plane roared through the night. The vibration rattled through the metal walls, her rifle cradled against her knees, her heart pounding in her chest. Around her, the others sat in silence, faces painted, eyes steady. Sat across from her, his jaw clenched, unreadable in the dim red light. For weeks she had fought to prove herself beside him. Tonight, the test would be different. Tonight, failure meant more than whispers. It meant lives. The mission had come suddenly. A small outpost in hostile territory had gone dark. No communication, no explanation. They were to insert, secure, and extract if necessary. Routine on paper. Nothing about it felt routine, too. The commander had given the briefing himself. His voice calm, clipped, no wasted words. You will move as one, no hesitation, no ego. If you see hesitation in your partner, you steady them. If you see fear, you shield them. And if you see doubt, you cut through it before it spreads. Clear. The squad answered in unison. His voice joined theirs, but inside, her chest tightened. She knew he wasn't speaking to all of them. Not really. Those words had landed squarely on her shoulders. As the plane neared drop, the air grew heavier, every second stretching. Checked his gear without a word, movements mechanical. Forced her breathing steady, her fingers tracing the strap of her rifle. She remembered the first drill, the humiliation, the commander's voice pulling her out of the mud of herself. Eyes on me. Would that voice be enough here, where bullets would not miss and doubt would not wait? The jump signal flashed. One by one the squad moved, swallowed by the night sky. His turn came. Her stomach clenched, the roar of the wind ripping against her body as she dove into the abyss. Darkness enveloped her, stars above, nothing below. For a moment she wasn't a soldier. She was a girl again, falling through silence, haunted by voices. Then the chute deployed, snapping her back into the mission, the world rushing into focus. The landing was rough. Mud splashed against her boots, the ground slick, the forest thick with shadows. She unhooked fast, rifle raised, eyes scanning. The others gathered in silence, formation sharp. No words wasted. Only the rhythm of boots, the rustle of gear. The outpost came into view minutes later, faint shapes against the tree line, too still. No movement, no sound. Pulse quickened. Training whispered that silence was its own kind of scream. Something was wrong. They approached low, rifles up, eyes cutting through the dark. Motioned, hand signals sharp, directing them around the perimeter. Followed her sector, scanning windows, doorways. Nothing. Until a sound, faint, metallic. She froze, breath caught in her throat. Clear, hissed from the other side. But it wasn't clear, she knew it. The sound echoed again, faint but real. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She should speak. She should warn them, but her throat locked. What if she was wrong? What if the sound was nothing, just nerves, just the ghosts of failure returning to haunt her? She saw his hand signal again. Move. Her boots shifted forward, and then it happened. The explosion tore through the night. A door blown from its hinges, fire flashing, earth shuddering. The squad hit the ground as debris rained down. Shouts cracked through the comms. His ears rang, her vision blurred, but the sound of gunfire cut through the chaos. They were not alone. Figures burst from the tree line. Hostile, armed, relentless. Bullets tore through branches, sparks flashing against metal. His body froze, pinned by the storm of sound and light. For a heartbeat too long, she was back on the training field, missing shot after shot, drowning under the weight of whispers. Then a voice cut through it, not shouted, not frantic, calm, steady, eyes on me. Her head snapped up. Through the chaos, through the blur of fire and smoke, she saw him. The commander. Not on the field, not in her imagination this time, but here, moving with precision, covering the squad, his eyes meeting hers for the briefest instant. Something broke inside her. The paralysis shattered. Her rifle rose, hands steady, breath sharp. She fired. One hostile dropped, then another. Training surged back, the rhythm returning. Every squeeze of the trigger steadied her pulse. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't flawless. But she was no longer frozen. The firefight stretched, brutal and fast. The squad pushed forward, clearing the outpost, room by room. Barked commands, his voice edged with urgency. Moved with him, covering angles, her back pressed to his. For the first time, they weren't rivals. They were survival. Inside the command room, the truth became clear. The outpost hadn't gone dark on its own. Sabotage. Systems gutted, equipment destroyed. A message left scrawled across the wall in jagged strokes. Leave or we bury you here. The commander scanned the room, face carved from stone. We hold until extraction. Secure perimeter. Hours bled into the night. Gunfire flared, faded, returned again. Arms ached, her body screamed for rest, but she held her post. The fear hadn't vanished, it never did, but it no longer owned her. Every time doubt clawed, she remembered the commander's nod, the moment she had stood again in the mud. She remembered that belief was heavier than fear, and sometimes that was enough. When extraction finally came, dawn was breaking. The squad trudged back to the chopper, bodies battered, eyes hollow. Walked ahead, silent, shoulders tense. Followed, her rifle low, her heart still racing. Back aboard, the silence lingered. No one spoke, not yet, then turned, eyes narrowing on her. For a moment she braced for the same disdain, the same sharp edge, but instead he gave a single nod, small, reluctant, but real. Looked away, her chest tight. She didn't smile. Respect in this world wasn't gifted. It was earned, and tonight she had earned a fraction of it. The commander said nothing. Not to her, not to anyone. But when she caught his eyes across the cabin, she saw it again. That steadiness, that silent belief. And for the first time, she realized something terrifying. Belief wasn't the end of the test. It was the beginning of it. Because if she failed now, if she faltered again, it would no longer just confirm her father's voice or doubts. It would stain the belief of the one man who had refused to look away. And that was a weight heavier than war itself. Why did silence feel heavier than battle? That was the question pressing on his chest as the helicopter blades slowed, the roar fading into the hollow quiet of base camp. Hours earlier, gunfire had lit the night, the outpost had nearly collapsed, and every heartbeat had been a fight against death. But now, in the stillness, she found herself more unsettled. Combat had rules, cruel but clear. Silence had none. Silence left room for thoughts, and thoughts were dangerous. The squad disembarked, boots heavy against the tarmac. No one spoke. Their faces carried the same mask she was learning to wear, expressionless, unreadable. But she saw the weight behind their eyes. Past her without a word, his nod from the helicopter already swallowed by the next storm inside him. She wanted to hold on to it, to believe it meant something permanent. But in this place, respect was fragile. It could vanish with a single mistake. The commander dismissed them with a sharp gesture. Rest, debrief at dawn. His voice didn't waver but caught the faintest shadow in his expression, as if he carried something none of them could see. She wanted to ask. She wanted to know why his silence followed her like a shadow, why his eyes never gave away more than belief. But recruits didn't ask commanders questions. Not about the war, not about themselves, and certainly not about him. In the barracks, she sat on her bunk, boots still on, hands resting against her knees. The others collapsed, some sleeping instantly, others staring blankly at the ceiling. Couldn't. Her mind was louder than the battlefield. She saw her father's face, the lines around his mouth, carved by anger and disappointment, the way his eyes glazed over when the bottle sat in his hand. She remembered the nights when his words cut deeper than any bullet ever could. "You'll never be enough. Not for them, not for me." She had hated him for it, but worse, she had believed him. For years, she carried his judgment like armor, heavy, suffocating, convincing herself that if she could endure his contempt, she could endure anything. But here, among soldiers who measured worth in silence and precision, his voice was still alive, still whispering, still winning. She pressed her palms together, forcing herself to breathe. The memory wasn't new, it came every night, but tonight it collided with something else. The commander's voice, "Eyes on me." The clash of them tore her apart, one voice pulling her down, one pulling her forward. "Can't sleep." The voice startled her. He stood by his bunk across the room, pulling off his boots, his expression unreadable. Shook her head, "Not tonight." He studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Get used to it. Sleep doesn't come easy after your first real firefight." She expected mockery, another reminder of her failure. But his tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact, almost human. She didn't answer, and he didn't push. A moment later, he lay down, turning away, but something had shifted between them, subtle and unspoken. The next morning, the debrief carved open the wounds again. Reports read, mistakes dissected, every decision measured in cold language. His role was mentioned briefly. Steady aim, covered her sector, no errors noted. Yet she felt the weight of eyes again. Not doubt this time, expectation. And somehow expectation felt even heavier. Afterward, the commander dismissed them, but when she moved to leave, his voice stopped her. She froze, the others filed out, glancing back. Lingered, but the commander's sharp look sent him on his way. The room emptied, silence stretching. He didn't speak at first. He studied her, gaze steady, unreadable. She felt stripped bare under it, every failure, every scar exposed. Finally he asked, "Why are you here?" The question cut deeper than she expected. She opened her mouth, closed it. The answers she carried, duty, honor, proving herself, all felt hollow under his eyes. He wasn't asking for slogans. He wanted truth. Her throat tightened. "Because I didn't want to be what he said I was." The commander didn't ask who. He didn't need to. He nodded once, slow, as though confirming something he already knew. "That's not enough. Hatred doesn't hold in battle. Proving someone wrong doesn't keep you steady when everything breaks. You need more." Swallowed hard, "And if I don't have more?" His eyes stayed locked on hers. "Then you'll find it, or you won't last." The words weren't cruel, they were simple, honest, and honesty was sharper than any reprimand. She nodded, unable to speak. He dismissed her with the same calm finality he used on the field. She walked out, her chest heavier than before, not because he doubted her, but because he was right. She had built her entire life around fighting a ghost, and ghosts didn't bleed. That night, exhaustion finally dragged her into sleep, and with it came dreams, not of battle, not of glare or the commander's steady eyes, but of her childhood. A girl sitting at a kitchen table, waiting for a father who never came home sober. A girl clutching her mother's hand, only to watch it slip away into illness and silence. A girl staring into a cracked mirror, telling herself she would run far enough, fight hard enough to escape the weight of her name. But in the dream, the commander was there too. Not in uniform, not in command, just standing in the corner, silent, steady, watching, and his voice came again. "Eyes on me." She woke with a start, heart pounding, breath ragged. For the first time, she realized what terrified her most. She wasn't just fighting to prove her father wrong. She was fighting to prove the commander right. And that responsibility was heavier than any rucksack, any rifle, any mission. The days that followed blurred together, training, drills, briefings, but beneath it all felt the shift, her movements sharper, her breath steadier. The squad noticed too, no longer smirked at her mistakes because there were fewer of them. Others began to watch her differently, no longer with doubt but with something resembling respect. Still, the whispers lingered, not loud, not cruel, but present. Was she becoming a soldier, or was she just a reflection of the commander's belief? Would she crumble without it? She didn't know. And the not knowing was its own kind of battle. It was during a late evening run that the question nearly broke her. The sun dipped low, the horizon burning orange and red. Her legs screamed, lungs clawing for air. Ran beside her, steady as always. He glanced at her, eyes narrowing. "You're pushing harder," he said. Nodded, breathless. "Why?" The question cut, simple but loaded. She wanted to say for the team, for the mission, for herself. But the truth pressed harder. She was running from her father, running toward the commander's belief. Running because stopping meant being swallowed by silence. She didn't answer, and didn't press, but his question stayed with her long after the run ended. That night, staring at the ceiling of the barracks, she whispered the truth into the dark where no one could hear. "Because if I stop, I'll be him, and I'd rather die than be him." The words hung in the air, fragile and raw, and for the first time she realized survival wasn't just about battlefields. It was about not letting the ghosts of your past drag you back into the dirt. And yet, as her eyes closed, a new thought crept in, heavier, sharper. What if the war she was fighting inside mattered less than the one waiting outside? What if the ghosts she couldn't kill followed her into missions, into decisions, into lives that depended on her? Because belief wasn't permanent, it was fragile, and fragile things had a way of breaking at the worst possible time. Why did belonging feel so fragile? That was the thought pressing into his chest as she stood at the training field weeks after the outpost mission. The air was cooler now, the sun breaking through in soft gold instead of burning heat. Her rifle lay steady in her grip. The targets fell one after another, her shots clean, deliberate, confident. And for the first time since she arrived, she didn't hear whispers behind her. She heard silence, not the silence of doubt, but the silence of recognition. When the drill ended, past her on the way back. No smirk, no muttered insult, just a quick glance, a half-tilt of his chin, almost like a greeting. It wasn't much, but in this world it was everything. By evening, even the barracks felt different. The air wasn't heavy with suspicion anymore. When one of the recruits cracked a joke, laughed, not nervously, not as an outsider, but as one of them. She didn't realize how much she had longed for that sound until it left her throat. She lay in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, a small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in years, the voice of her father wasn't the loudest in her head. For the first time, she felt like she was no longer just surviving. She was becoming. But belonging, she would learn, can be ripped away in a single moment. The next mission came faster than expected. No time for reflection, no time for doubt. Orders came at dawn, infiltration and extraction. A convoy ambushed deep in hostile territory, survivors unconfirmed. The squad prepped in silence, the kind that came when everyone knew what was at stake. Checked her gear, fingers steady. She felt different this time, not untested, not a liability, but part of the machine. When caught her eye, he gave a quick nod. This time she returned it without hesitation. They moved under cover of night. The air was thick, heavy with the kind of stillness that screamed danger. Kept her rifle up, her breath measured, every step precise. The commander led them through the terrain, his presence as steady as ever. She found herself unconsciously mirroring his pace, his posture. "Eyes on me." The words lived in her bones now. The convoy came into view at first light. Burned-out vehicles scattered across the dirt road, smoke curling into the sky. The smell of charred metal and fuel clung to the air. No movement, no sound. "Eyes sharp," whispered. They advanced carefully, weapons scanning every shadow. His boots crunched softly against the dirt as her eyes caught movement inside one of the overturned trucks. Her heart jolted. She raised her hand, signaling. The squad froze. A figure crawled out, bloodied, uniform torn, a soldier, alive. Relief rippled through the squad. They surged forward, pulling the survivor clear, voices low but urgent. helped steady him, his weight heavy against her shoulder. His lips trembled as he tried to speak. Only one word came through the blood on his tongue. Drab. The explosion came a second later. The ground erupted, a fireball tearing through the wreckage. Hit the dirt, ears ringing, heat searing her skin. Shouts filled the air, orders shouted, weapons raised. From the tree line, gunfire erupted. Hostiles poured in, their ambush perfect, merciless. Scrambled to cover, rifle raised, adrenaline surging. The squad returned fire, bullets cracking through the air. The smell of smoke and blood clung thick as chaos swallowed them whole. She found pinned behind a burning truck, firing blind into the trees. She slid beside him, returning fire, her aim sharp, precise. One target down, another, but they just kept coming. The commander's voice cut through the chaos, calm, deliberate. Hold the line, no collapse, we stand together. And for a moment it worked. The squad held, hostiles dropped, the perimeter stayed intact, but then saw it movement along the flank, a shadow breaking through, too close, too fast. She shouted. He turned too late. The hostile raised his weapon, barrel aimed, didn't think, she moved. Her body slammed into, shoving him down as the shot rang out. Pain seared through her shoulder, white-hot, blinding. She fell hard, rifle slipping from her hands. The world blurred, shouts distant. Gunfire muffled. She pressed her hand against the wound, blood soaking her fingers, her breath ragged. She saw scramble up, firing into the trees, his face carved with something she had never seen in him before, fear. Not for himself, for her. The firefight dragged, brutal and relentless. Vision darkened, her body screaming. But she refused to let go. Not here, not now. She crawled toward her rifle, hand trembling, dragging herself inch by inch. The commander appeared beside her, covering fire sharp, unflinching. He dropped beside her, pressing his hand hard against her wound, his voice steady even as bullets tore the air. Stay with me. Do not close your eyes. Gasped, teeth clenched against the pain. I can still fight. His eyes burned into hers. Then fight, but don't fight me, fight for you. She gritted her teeth, forcing her body to move, to rise. With his cover, she pulled herself upright, rifle back in her hands. Every shot sent pain surging through her body, but she kept firing. One after another. Hostiles dropped. The squad pushed forward. Minutes stretched like hours, and then silence. The last hostile fell, smoke curled, bodies littered the ground. The squad regrouped, battered, bloodied but alive. Stumbled toward her, his face pale. He grabbed her uninjured arm, steadying her. For the first time his voice cracked. You saved my life. Couldn't answer, her throat tightened. The pain in her shoulder was blinding, but it was what broke her. It was his eyes, respect, real, unquestionable. The commander moved past them, giving orders for extraction. His face didn't show relief, didn't show pride. But when his eyes met hers, she saw it. The belief hadn't wavered. If anything, it had deepened. On the ride back, sat in silence, blood-soaked bandage pressed against her shoulder. Sat across from her, his gaze steady, no longer cold, no longer distant. She looked away, tears stinging her eyes, not from the wound, but from the truth settling in her chest. Belonging had come, real, undeniable, but it had cost blood, and the cost, she realized, would never stop rising. That night, lying on her bunk, pain stabbing through every breath, she thought of her father, of the man who told her she would never be enough. She almost wanted to scream at him, to tell him she had become more than enough, that she had saved a life, earned respect, stood her ground. But the scream never came. Instead, a whisper left her lips, I am not you. And for the first time, she believed it. Still, a shadow lingered, because the war wasn't done. And if tonight had taught her anything, it was this: belonging is fragile and blood is always its price. Why did quiet conversations feel more dangerous than gunfire? That was the thought circling her mind as she sat in the mess hall weeks after the ambush. Her shoulder was still wrapped, aching when she moved too quickly, but healing. Around her, the squad ate in silence, the clatter of trays and utensils the only sound. War had a way of swallowing words. No one wanted to give voice to what they couldn't control. Sat across from her, for once he wasn't glaring, he wasn't smirking, he was simply there. His eyes glanced to her shoulder, then back to his tray. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost reluctant. "You shouldn't have taken that shot for me." Pause, spoon in hand. "If I hadn't, you'd be dead." He looked at her, jaw tight. "Maybe, but out there, trading lives doesn't always balance the way you think." She didn't answer, he didn't push. But something in his eyes had changed. It wasn't disdain anymore. It wasn't even rivalry. It was something harder to define, a weight, a debt, one neither of them could erase. Later that evening, as the squad prepared for night drills, the commander called aside. She followed him to the edge of the training field, the moonlight casting sharp shadows across his face. His gaze was steady, the same as always, but tonight it carried a quiet edge. "You made a choice," he said simply. "Straightened to protect my team." His head tilted slightly. "Or to prove yourself." The question pierced deeper than she expected. Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to say it had been pure instinct, loyalty, nothing more. But the silence between them left no room for lies. "I don't know," she admitted. The commander nodded once. "Then figure it out. Because next time, that hesitation between loyalty and ego might cost more than your own blood." His words weren't sharp, but they cut. She swallowed hard, nodding. He turned, walking back toward the others. She stood there a moment longer, chest heavy, before following. The drills that night were brutal. Exhaustion clawed at her body, but she pushed through. Each obstacle, each repetition, each breath became more than training. It was a question. Who was she fighting for? What was she trying to prove? The commander's words lingered like a wound she couldn't bandage. Trained beside her, silent but steady. He didn't smirk when she stumbled, didn't gloat when he outpaced her. If anything, he slowed just enough to keep her in stride. She noticed, but neither of them said a word. Some things in this world didn't need speaking. Days blurred into weeks. Missions came and went, smaller ones, controlled. Each time grew sharper. The squad no longer doubted her. Respect no longer had to be earned every second. And yet beneath it all she felt the weight growing. The more they believed in her, the more terrified she became of failing them. One evening, sitting outside the barracks, she found beside her, both staring out at the fading light. For a long time neither spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. "You ever think about what happens when this ends?" Frowned. "When what ends?" "All of it, missions, training, war. Do you ever think about what's left?" She hesitated. No one asked questions like that here. No one dared, but she found herself answering anyway. "I used to. I thought if I got far enough, if I fought hard enough, I'd find peace on the other side." "And now?" asked. His voice softened. "Now I think the fight never ends. It just changes shape." He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He just nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he'd always known. The commander passed by then, his presence pulling both of them to their feet instinctively. He paused, eyes on them. For a brief second thought she saw something flicker in his expression. Not disapproval, not pride, something else. Something almost human. But then it was gone, replaced by the same stone he always wore. That night couldn't sleep. She thought about his question, about the commander's warning, about her father's voice still clawing at her in the quiet. She turned the words over in her head until dawn painted the sky. The next mission briefing came with little warning. The target, a suspected weapons cache hidden in a small village, simple in theory, dangerous in practice, civilians in the area, no room for error. The commander laid it out clearly. "We move fast, we move quiet. If there's resistance, you don't engage unless there's no choice. The objective is intelligence, not destruction." Listened, her chest tightening. This wasn't just about precision. It was about restraint. and restraint had always been harder for her than pulling a trigger. They moved out at dusk, the village quiet under fading light. Children played near doorways, women carrying water, men gathered near fires. It looked ordinary, too ordinary. Gut twisted. Ordinary was always the mask danger wore best. The squad split into positions, scanning, searching. Moved with along the edge of the village, her eyes sweeping doorways, windows, every shadow. The people watched them with wary eyes, but no one spoke. No one ran. Then it happened. A man stepped from a doorway, hands raised, voice sharp in a language couldn't understand. Raised a hand, signaling caution. His rifle tightened in her grip. Something in the man's eyes, not fear, not surrender, but calculation, made her pulse quicken. Her finger hovered on the trigger. Every muscle in her body screamed danger, but the commander's voice echoed in her head. Restraint. The moment stretched too long. From the corner of her eye she caught it, another figure slipping from behind the house, weapon half hidden. Her throat locked. She started, but the gunfire came first. Chaos exploded. Civilians scattered, screams filling the air. Hostiles poured from doorways, weapons flashing. The village transformed in seconds, ordinary turning deadly. Dropped to cover, firing back, heart pounding. Shouted orders, the squad scrambling into defensive positions. But it wasn't like the ambush before. This time, the battlefield wasn't empty. Civilians were everywhere. Her rifle lined on a hostile moving fast through the crowd. But behind him, a child. His breath caught. Her finger froze. One pull of the trigger and the child would fall with him. The memory of her father's voice surged. You'll never be enough. The commander's voice cut through it, eyes on me. She shifted, breath sharp, waiting for the shot, the angle, the moment, and then she took it. The hostile dropped. The child stumbled but unharmed. Her chest heaved, her body trembling. For the first time she realized what it meant to carry both belief and restraint, not just to fight but to protect. When the firefight ended, the village lay in ruins. Smoke curled from rooftops, bodies littered the dirt. The squad regrouped, battered but alive. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly as he reloaded. He met her eyes, and in them she saw it, not just respect now. Trust. The commander walked past, scanning the wreckage. His face unreadable, but when his eyes lingered on, she felt it again. That silent belief, that unspoken weight. But as they marched back through the wreckage, his chest tightened. Not from pride, not from victory, from something else. A question that wouldn't leave her. If protecting the squad and protecting civilians meant hesitating, even for a second, what would happen when the cost of that hesitation was one of her own? Because belief could steady you, but belief could also break you. And somewhere deep down knew the break was coming. Why did the air feel wrong before the first shot was even fired? That was the thought that lingered in his chest as the squad moved into the mountains under a pale dawn. The mission was simple on paper: intercept a weapons convoy before it crossed the border. Straightforward, predictable, but simplicity was a lie in this world, and every step they took on the narrow ridge felt like it was leading them into something waiting to break. Kept her rifle steady, her breath sharp against the cold. The commander moved at the front, pace unhurried, eyes scanning the terrain with a patience that came from years of survival. Flanked her, silent as always, but she felt his presence like an anchor. The squad trusted her now. She trusted them, and that trust made her chest heavier than the pack on her shoulders. They reached the overlook just as the convoy appeared in the distance, 3 trucks, armed escorts, moving slow along the valley road. The commander raised a fist, signaling hold. The squad dropped into positions, rifles trained, breath quiet. The plan was simple: ambush, neutralize, secure, but's gut twisted, too easy. The first truck rolled closer, whispered, "On your mark." The commander's hand lifted, paused, dropped. Gunfire erupted. The first escort fell. Bullets tore through metal, glass shattering. The truck skidded, hostiles spilling into the dirt. The The squad moved with precision, covering angles, clearing sectors. Shots were sharp, clean. She felt the rhythm of it, the machine they had become. Then the second truck exploded. The blast ripped through the valley, throwing fire and earth into the air. Hit the dirt, ears ringing, vision blurred. Screams cut through the smoke. When her eyes cleared, she saw it. The truck had been rigged. Not a convoy, a trap. Hostiles poured from the cliffs above, rifles flashing, mortars pounding the ridge. The squad scattered, pinned down by relentless fire, scrambled to cover, hearts slamming. The world was chaos, smoke, fire, screams, but one sound cut sharper than all the rest. Hit. Her chest seized. She spun, eyes locking on him. He was down, clutching his side, blood soaking through his uniform. A hostile moved in fast, rifle raised. Fired without thinking, the shot tearing him down. She crawled toward, bullets snapping overhead, her hands pressing against his wound. His eyes locked on hers, wide with pain. "Go," he gasped. "Not leaving you," she hissed, voice sharp, trembling. The commander appeared through the smoke, covering them with precise bursts of fire. His voice was steady, but his eyes were burning. "We can't hold. We move now." Shook her head, pressing harder against wound. "He won't make it if we move him." The commander crouched beside her, gaze hard. "He won't make it if we stay." The words cut, sharp and merciless. She looked down at his face, pale, lips trembling. His hand grabbed hers weakly, grip faint but insistent. "Don't waste it. You saved me once. Don't make it twice." Tears blurred her vision. The battlefield roared around them, but in that moment, silence pressed harder than sound. She couldn't move. She couldn't let go. The commander's voice sliced through her paralysis. "Eyes on me." Her head snapped up, tears streaking her face. His eyes locked on hers, steady, grounding, the same as that first day. But this time the command wasn't about shooting. It was about surviving, about choosing. Her throat burned. She nodded, choking back the sob rising in her chest. She leaned close to, her voice breaking. "I'll carry you with me." His grip loosened, his eyes closed, and then he was gone. Something inside her shattered. The commander pulled her up, dragging her to cover as the squad fell back, gunfire relentless. She fired through the blur of tears, her shots sharp, furious. Every hostile that dropped felt meaningless, every burst of fire empty. The world had narrowed to the hole in her chest where his voice had been. They fought their way out, the commander leading with ruthless precision, the squad covering each other step by step. By the time they reached extraction, the sun had risen high, casting the valley in brutal light. Smoke curled from the wreckage below. Collapsed into the helicopter, her body trembling, her hands still stained with blood. The squad was silent. No one spoke. No one needed to. The loss was carved into every face. The commander sat across from her, his eyes steady, unreadable. For once she couldn't bear his gaze. She looked down, clutching her rifle, her breath ragged. Her chest screamed with guilt, grief, fury. She had saved once, and it hadn't been enough. Back at base, the silence was suffocating. The barracks felt hollow. His bunk sat empty, his boots still neatly lined beneath it. Sat on her bed, staring at the space across from her, her body numb. She wanted to scream, to break, to tear the walls down around her, but nothing came, just silence. The commander found her later, sitting alone outside under the stars. He didn't speak at first. He stood beside her, his presence heavy, steady. Finally, he said quietly, "You couldn't have saved him." Her jaw clenched. "I was supposed to." His eyes lingered on her, sharp but not unkind. "You were supposed to fight, to lead, to live. He knew that. That's why he told you to go." Her throat tightened. "Then why does it feel like I betrayed him?" The commander's gaze didn't waver. "Because belief is heavier than blood, and carrying it always feels like betrayal." She turned away, tears streaking her face, but his words burrowed into her chest. Belief was heavy, and now it wasn't just hers, had handed her his with his last breath, and that weight, she realized, would never leave her. She whispered into the night, barely audible. "How many times can I carry it before it breaks me?" The commander didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was its own truth. And as the night stretched on, knew, something in her had cracked, something that would never fully heal. She had wanted belonging. She had found it, but belonging in war always came with a cost, and tonight the cost had a name. Yes. Why did silence after loss feel louder than war itself? That was the question carried in her chest as days bled into nights at the base. The squad moved through the routines, drills, missions, briefings, but every step felt slower, heavier. Absence was carved into the air like a scar. His bunk stayed empty, his boots untouched, his laughter, sharp and cutting once, now gone. The barracks echoed with a hollow she couldn't escape. Rose each morning before the others, sitting on the edge of her bed with her rifle across her knees. Her shoulder had healed, but her chest had not. She polished the rifle in silence, not because it needed it, but because the ritual steadied her hands. If she kept them moving, maybe her mind wouldn't break. The commander didn't mention in briefings. He didn't speak of the mission, the ambush, or the choice she had been forced to make. But she felt it in his eyes every time they met hers. Not judgment, not pity, something harder, something heavier, belief sharpened by expectation. She hated it, she needed it. At night she dreamed of the valley, the fire, the smoke, eyes locking on hers as he said, "Don't waste it." She woke gasping, sweat soaking her skin, the weight of his last words pressing harder than her father's voice ever had. Belief was heavier than blood. The commander was right. And now she carried two burdens, the voice that had once told her she wasn't enough and the voice that had died believing she was. Weeks later, orders came again. Another mission, not as dangerous as the last but enough to test them, enough to drag them back into the fire. The squad prepared in silence, their faces hard, checked her gear, her hands steady, her breath slow, but inside her chest burned, not with fear, with something sharper. She couldn't fail again. The mission took them across broken terrain, through abandoned villages where shadows moved in windows and silence carried weight. Every sound made her heart jolt. Every echo threatened to rip open the valley in her memory. But she held her ground, rifle steady, steps measured. When contact came, it was sudden, a burst of gunfire from the hills, bullets slicing the air. The squad hit the dirt, returning fire. His body moved without hesitation. Aim, breathe, fire. Her shots were sharp, controlled. Each target fell, each movement steady. Her hands didn't tremble this time, not once. In the chaos, one of the younger recruits froze, rifle clutched tight, eyes wide, paralyzed. Saw it instantly. She knew the look. She had worn it once herself. Fear had swallowed him whole. For a split second, she saw instead. His body on the dirt, his blood on her hands. The weight of his belief surged, pressing her forward. She crawled to the recruit, grabbing his shoulder, forcing his eyes to hers. "Eyes on me." The words left her lips before she realized. Sharp, grounding, the same words that had pulled her back from the edge. The recruit blinked, his breathing slowing. His rifle steadied. He followed her lead, firing sharp, clean. They moved together, covering angles, holding ground. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just carrying belief anymore. She was giving it. The firefight ended minutes later. The squad regrouped, battered but alive. The young recruit sat beside her, chest heaving, eyes still wide but steady now. He whispered, almost in disbelief, "I thought I was done." Looked at him, her voice low. "You were, not while someone believes you can stand." He nodded, eyes dropping, but his hands stopped shaking. The commander walked past, scanning the perimeter. He paused when his gaze landed on her. Their eyes locked, and for the first time she saw something different. A shift. His belief hadn't vanished, but it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't just him carrying her. It was him recognizing that she had begun to carry others. That night back at base, sat outside alone. The stars stretched wide, silent witnesses to the battles they would never see. She thought of his smirk, his silence, his nod in the helicopter, his last breath in the valley, she whispered into the night, voice trembling but steady. "I didn't waste it." The wind carried the words away, but in her chest they stayed. She thought of her father then, the man who told her she'd never be enough. His voice was still there, faint like a scar that never faded, but it no longer defined her. It was just one voice among many now, and it was quieter than the others, quieter than the commander, quieter than her own. For the first time, she understood something. She hadn't come here just to prove her father wrong. She hadn't survived just to carry the commander's belief. She was here to carry herself and now to carry others when they couldn't. The next morning the squad gathered for drills, moved with them, her steps sharp, her breath steady. The young recruit glanced at her once, his eyes different now, steadier, stronger. She had seen that change before. She had lived it. The commander gave the orders, voice calm, clipped. But when he passed her, he spoke quietly enough for only her to hear. "You said it, didn't you?" Her chest tightened. She didn't answer. He nodded slightly, the faintest trace of something, almost a smile, flickering in his eyes. "Good, pass it on." And then he was gone, his voice sharp again, barking commands. Stood taller, her rifle steady, her breath calm. The weight hadn't vanished. It never would, but it no longer crushed her. It shaped her. Because belief, she realized, was never meant to be carried alone. It was meant to be passed on, like fire in the dark, keeping others from collapsing when the world closed in. The drills began, boots pounded the dirt, voices shouted, and beneath it all felt a quiet strength rise in her chest, not loud, not defiant, just steady. She whispered it once more, this time not to the commander, not even to herself, but to the air, to the recruits, to anyone who would need it one day. "Eyes on me." And in the silence after, she finally understood. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And sometimes courage isn't found within, it's unlocked when someone refuses to look away.